Greetings, Team DPS. I'm Dr. Alex Marrero, proud superintendent of Denver Public Schools. Thank you for tuning in to this special edition of the Marrero Moment, and today we're excited to bring you not one, but two incredible guests. Both are leaders in our student success teams, their respective teams, and they're here to dive into the vital conversation about student outcomes, specifically for our Black and Latine students. Here at DPS, this conversation you surely will not want to miss. I want to start off by welcoming Mr. Michael Atkins. Welcome, sir.
Thank you for having me.
Sorry for the long reach. And la doctora Patricia Hurrieta.
Mucho gusto, gracias.
Igual. Michael Atkins is our Director of Black Student Success, and Dr. Hurrieta is our Director of Latine Student Success. Thank you all. I want to start off by just opening up. Can you share with the audience not only your involvement in this incredible district, but you all have educational history, I learned before we mic'd up. Patricia, you want to start off?
Absolutely.
Okay.
So back when I was the principal the first time around, about 20 years ago, Mr. Atkins was applying for teaching jobs and had a little bit of a rough time getting his foot in the door, so I happily hired him at Godsman to be one of our second grade teachers, and then kept him on full time once the temporary position ended.
Remember that?
Of course I remember that. You know, oftentimes with our situations, we are looking to get into the door. And sometimes that door is locked. As she said, that I had a hard time finding a job and securing a teaching position once I got my certification. Sometimes that door is locked, and sometimes you have to go through that basement window. And when I got through that basement window, it was Dr. Hurrieta who was right there waiting for me.
It's a perfect way to start. If you don't mind, I'm going to go and dig in a little bit more about your past and how your past has molded you to the professional and the leader that you are today, and how it informs Black student success. Same question will be posed to you, Doctora.
Yeah, you know, I tell people that I've been part of this district since I was 4 years old, in some capacity or another. Along the way, I've worn many different hats. And the work that we are currently doing to continue the fight for equity, educational equity, started when I was 4 years old, right? And during that time, I was embraced through some things that was happening in my community. One thing was the Noel resolution, and that led to the Keys versus District 1 desegregation of schools case. The first desegregation of schools case outside the South, and the first in collaboration with our Black and Latine families, right? The outcome of that is I was bused out of my community for elementary and middle school, and learned a lot about myself, and I really gained a passion of what I wanted education to be like when I got into a position of power. Fast forward a couple of years later, I'm a teacher, and then we have the Bailey report, right? Which is that qualitative study of the experience of Black stakeholders within DPS, and that informed the creation of the Equity Task Force, which I proudly served on, and one of the working groups, which founded and created recommendations for the district, and really informed, reinformed or reignited my passions for this work of educational equity. From there, we go to the Black Excellence Resolution, right? Which requires our schools to have a Black Excellence Plan, a strategic plan that is created with multiple stakeholders of how we can actualize that Black Excellence Resolution and actualize the Bailey Report and actualize the recommendations of the African American Equity Task Force. And then we have the No Justice, No Peace resolution, right? Which says that our students advocating that they are demanding to be seen in instruction within the classroom, and how our teachers are showing up in front of them every single day, right? So all of those things culminated has allowed for this new initiative to continue on the work, right? This isn't a new thing. All of those things in the past inform our opportunity to do this work today.
Thank you for that. Long history and similar. A similar history from the West walkouts, blowouts,
Yes.
to consent decree.
Yes.
A little bit of the history, your history, and how you've been involved and how it's informed LLS, Latina Student Success.
So like Mike, I have over half a century. He probably doesn't have over half a century, but over half a century in the district. He is younger than me. I started as a kindergartner, and I was always immersed in schools where there were many Latina students. And so I never felt like I was an outsider until we moved to Southwest Denver, which wasn't, it wasn't as diverse at the time. This is back in the late 70s, early 80s. And so that was the first time I really felt out of place. I grew up as a simultaneous bilingual, which was something that was cherished up until about 4th grade. And then I kind of stood out, like, oh, she's the only one in our school who speaks 2 languages. She can roll her R's. They thought it was really comical. Students more than staff. I've always had pretty good relationships with teachers. There's always been one teacher along the way that has kind of pulled me up and kept me going. And then once I got to high school, it was a little different. I was still able to take advanced classes, accelerated classes, AP classes, but nobody ever came and talked to me about college. It was my dad, who didn't know that much about college, who really pushed me to go and offered to pay for my first semester. And while at Metro, I took the education of the Chicano child, and I thought, I didn't have this type of experience. I feel like my experience was a little better than what the average Latino was getting at the time. And so it really propelled me into a career in education. Like, I just couldn't see how I could do anything else other than to serve my people. And between that and having a priest at the time who was very much community oriented, very servant leadership oriented, it taught me and molded for me in my own heart that this is my work, this is my heart work. Once I graduated from college, I was able to get in a little easier than Mike was into a teaching position because they were looking for bilingual educators as a result of the Keys case and some other cases that came along. And so I started my teaching career with my mom, because I am very family oriented, as many Latina people are. My mom was my kindergarten para, and so I taught I've always been on the west side of Denver. Started in the north, and as gentrification happened, I moved south with the kids. To the point where I got to be in a school where I got to roll out a whole dual language program that was one way. That's when I got to hire Mike. He learned all about bilingual education. Able to give most of the teachers a master's, whoever wanted it, with the CU Bueno Center. And through that work, I discovered that our bilingual population was actually receiving more attention than our Chicano population, who had been here much longer, centuries longer. And so I went downtown for a little bit and then decided that I needed to go to a school that was predominantly Chicano, where there wasn't much Spanish spoken, to see what the disparities were and why this was happening. And so I ended up at Grant Ranch, way southwest, and really understood why our communities were so angry and what kind of attention they needed. And it wasn't the same attention. Our Chicano boys are doing the worst in the district, so there is huge imperative to get this work done and to do it right. And without that, we're going to continue to suffer. And we have brilliant minds in all of our communities. We have brilliant minds that need to be brought to the forefront so that our students can have choices and educational equity and obtain what they want to obtain.
Yeah, well, thank you. And now we're in a position to make that change. Perfect segue for the next question that I wanted to pose. We hear it often in a Latina culture, Afro-Latino, Chicano, Mexicano. We're not monoliths. And even our liberation, perhaps, is definitely tied together with the Black and the Brown experience, although we have a lot of similarities in terms of obstacles and struggles. This is the beauty of this initiative, the respective approaches that we're taking. It's rooted in research, long-lasting research, more recent research, and trying to do what, quite frankly, no one has been able to accomplish. At DPS, we have a saying, you've heard me say it, that our mission, no trick question, it's plastered all over our buildings, is equity. Our purpose is education. We're educators. We could have chosen anything else, right? And take our talents and our craft. When you put those two together, it's our collective responsibility, which will be educational equity. You know, you all have purpose statements, but more of the why of Black student success, BSS, and Latina student success. I'll start with you, Doctora. So the LLS purpose statement and how it's connected to our shared core value of equity as a district. Can you tell us a little bit more about that, but also what you're planning to accomplish in this endeavor?
Yes, so connected to equity through the honoring of our linguistic and cultural differences and similarities, ensuring that educational equity happens through educational achievement in culturally sustaining curriculum, so that our students know that they belong, they know their history, and that it's not presented from the white focus, but that it truly is what we're brilliant at. I think that's probably the most important piece, ensuring that our families have an influence and are part of the decision-making process, so that it's not being done to them, but we're doing it with them.
Yeah.
We're educating children together. Another piece of that is for our staff. A lot of times our staff feel invisible if they are Latine and they're the only one or two in the building. And so how do we help them feel seen and like they belong? Because that in the end also impacts student achievement.
Yeah.
So we're really looking at a very wide scope of work in order to create that educational equity.
Yeah, thank you. Same question.
Yeah, you know, Pat captured most of it, and what I would just add to that is that our students come to us whole, right? They come to us whole and eager with gifts and brilliance that just deserve to be honored in their educational environment, right? And the practice of our families dropping their babies off at school at 7, 8 o'clock in the morning and then picking them up 7 hours later, that practice isn't broken, right? So what needs to be changed and evolved within education needs to be centering on our babies and what they walk into the door with. There's nothing we need to give them. We need to set them up for success within their learning environment. And this work is about capacity building. It's about capacity building of our educators, and how do we bring our families that may have been underserved within these same hallways back into the fold to be stakeholders and have voice and power in decision making that happens when they drop their most prized possessions off at our buildings, right?
Trusting us with them.
Trusting us with them.
Yeah.
So, school's not broken. We just need to continue to build capacity. Our educators are geniuses, and they are showing up and giving their all and working hard within that all, right? And when we do this correctly, their all won't be in the form of exhaustion at the end of the day. It'll be liberating at the end of the day, right?
Yeah. Yeah. You kind of touched on it, but the next area where I wanted to go was around respectively BSS and LLS in terms of your biggest hopes and goals for the future. Know that you're working with lab sites. You want to begin and explain to the audience how you're engaging with BSS and building that capacity that you mentioned?
Absolutely.
That you had in your school, by the way. I don't want that to go unnoticed. That no, we plugged someone who had evidence of it, and no, in terms of building capacity, high hopes. Mr. Atkins, tell us.
Yeah, you know, I'm grateful to have the opportunity to do this work. I'm grateful for the things that I was able to learn as a principal, and every community is different, right? And I understand that. I deeply understand that. And there are some things that we need to do to focus on how do we scale up to make sure we hit our goals and our roadmap, right? How do we scale up good practices to reinvent who we are just as a district and how we serve our black students, families, and employees. So I have a school of 5, a cohort of 5 schools. Shout out Joe Shoemaker, shout out Oakland Elementary, shout out Lowry Elementary, shout out Green Valley Elementary, and shout out Columbine Elementary, where we are, we have partners in this work on the University of Virginia and DU. DU is currently doing action research in our schools, identifying the classroom spaces that are getting the highest MGP with our black students. And they're sitting in those classrooms, they're observing, they're creating mental maps and really capturing data around teacher moves, and then how are students showing up differently in these spaces versus other spaces. Our partnership with the University of Virginia is really helping the principals around change management within their organization, within their schools. Because when we ask people to show up and do things differently as adults that have space and agency, that's hard.
Yeah.
So we have to be strategic when we're saying and providing feedback on black students and changing practice for our educators who serve those black students. So we have 90-day plans in all of our schools.
Awesome.
That is truly focused on K-1-2, because we can no longer afford our black students leaving these spaces and not being on grade level, right? The transition from learning to read to reading to learn is critical, right? So we're focused on K-1-2 in these schools, and we're focusing on building that capacity within that educator around foundational skills and really using the science of reading, and then change management process through UVA, and then listening and bringing in some of our partnership with DU to really flood these spaces. So then I can inform you, I can go to Dr. Marrero, these are some of the things that have worked. Let's scale this up. And then, yes.
Love it. Can't wait to see the outcomes. Similar question in terms of the LLS work and your big hopes, but very different approach in terms of how you are engaging. You also have some researchers, some professors who are supporting. Maybe you want to speak a little bit about La Raza and also the advisory team and how it's informing your work as well.
So the La Raza report is a result of the Multicultural Center, who did all of the research for us. They reached out to over 3,000 respondents. They did focus groups. There was a historical piece. So if you've not read the report, I mean, I know you have, but for the audience, it is out on the web. The historical piece is incredible. It talks about redlining, the Ku Klux Klan, all of the different court cases that have impacted our community. How gentrification has impacted, and then it moves into a quantitative piece where they looked at data for our students over time, I think about 10 years worth of time, to see how they were performing. And while we've gotten a little better, it's not enough. They also then conducted focus groups and surveys, and from those focus groups came up with 10 themes. From those 10 themes, they developed 36 recommendations that we're working on, which is a lot. And so we took all of this information to an advisory council, which you commissioned, which is brilliant in my opinion, because it is outsiders. So folks who are very interested in DPS but aren't a part of DPS, so they're able to push it into the system in a much different way. They're able to say, hey, are you sure that's a bold enough goal? Do we want to strive for a little bit more? And so it's been some really great work, really synthesizing and deeply understanding those recommendations so that we could come up with 5 long-term outcomes.
Awesome.
And then from those outcomes, we will start to develop. We haven't decided whether we're going to do a small cohort of schools or perhaps a lab school at the elementary and a lab school at the high school level, because we have goals for both. And once we determine that, we'll go down the academic route. We also have goals for human resources, for our families, for community engagement, and for climate and culture, and creating that sense of belonging.
Incredible, individualized approaches. Can't wait to see how it develops on both ends. But one of the many common threads is consistent with our strategic roadmap in terms of accelerating our most marginalized, our Black and our brown students. You touched on it, Mr. Atkins. You want to speak a little bit about the ambitious goals that we will achieve, and then if anything else you want to add in terms of the BSS work.
So our first goal is around reading. Reading is foundational. Like Mike said, you got to learn to read to learn. And so our first goal speaks to our third grade population, but obviously starts since early childhood education, because we want at least 80% of our students to be reading at or above grade level in their primary language if they are enrolled in a bilingual or dual language program, or in English if they are not. And then from that, we would make allowances for our new to country because they're a little bit behind because of their interrupted education, figuring out how to accelerate their trajectory. For our high school students, we want the vast majority to be enrolled in rigorous courses, whether that's career and technical education, concurrent enrollment, advanced placement classes, so that they can in turn turn around and be ready for college or whatever career they're looking to get into. For our staff, we really want them to feel like they belong. We know they need some coaching. We are finding that a lot of times they're applying for these positions and aren't able to get in for whatever reason. And so we're looking at some professional executive coaching for them, and then figuring out other ways to really bring us together as a family, the family that we are. For our climate and culture, looking at ways to help folks feel like they belong. So for instance, our high school students, having them enroll in ethnic studies and in Latino studies and Black American history, whatever it is that helps them understand that yes, you are part of our history. We are all part of our history. So those are our 5 goals. And Mike and I actually had a second chance to work together and do some coaching through the Learn to Lead program that we have. So I'm working closely with HR to figure out how do we make this even bigger. What I have found in meeting, I've met with almost every department I think you can think of on the academics team, one-on-one, and we have really promising practices. We have some amazing things going on in HR with recruitment. Our family and community engagement team, we have amazing practices that aren't always surfaced or scaled. And so sometimes I feel like the director of a orchestra where we're trying to get everybody on the same page so that everybody can see across the board the brilliance that we have in the Denver Public Schools.
Yeah, I think we have an opportunity because you both will identify those incredible success stories that are happening that we just fail to really just maximize on or learn from. Anything to add in terms of outcomes?
No, we have some similar outcomes. Our offices are right next door to each other, so we talk and collaborate often. And I'll just say that competence precedes confidence, right? And our work with BSS from the student level is just to make sure those babies have academic identities through confidence going into 3rd grade.
I love it, love it. Well, Doctora Hurrieta, Director of the Latine Student Success. Latine.
Is that the preferred nomenclature?
Well, I love that you asked that because that was where I was headed. No, Latine, Latinx, Latino, Latina. I know that your team explored this. Please
tell us. We did explore this. The advisory council even had a long conversation about it. There are many strong opinions.
Surely.
We have decided to go with Latine because it is the most inclusive term. It's inclusive of all the variety of cultures that are in the Latino community, the Chicano community, the South American community, the España, the Dominican Republic, and it's inclusive of all genders. And so that's why we have decided to go with Latine. I do identify as a Chicana, and I fall under the Latine umbrella.
Oh, I love it. Afro-Latino, and I fall under the same umbrella. What a tremendous pleasure having you here at our DPS studio for this special edition of the Marrero Moment. I want to thank you for coming on the show today, and we're thrilled to have you hear, but also to look to see the work that you're starting and where we'll end up as a district for our babies and for those historically marginalized. I want to thank everyone in our DPS community for joining us and being part of this and all the other conversations that impact our students. To keep up with the work from BSS, from LLS, visit our DPS website, and you can subscribe to all DPS content like the Marrero Moment by searching the Denver Public School Podcast. I'll see you next time. Join me by doing this.